What up, YouTube? You already know it's your favorite bean eating mofo, fresh off that banana boat. Big Lou tapping on in with what it do. Big Lou, NFCR2, baby, baby. And as always, if this is the first time you're coming to the channel at What It Do with Big Lou, NFCR2, be highly appreciated if you like, subbed, and shared the channel with your family, friends, folks, peoples, gente, associates, asocios, camaradas, comrades, buddies, pals, and feel free also to drop comments and I respond back to all the comments. Um, as you can see, it's about 2:30 Pacific time here in California, and it's a couple of hours after Halloween 2022, which we had a decent time out last night. Well, the kids had fun, got a little bit of candy, you know what I'm saying? We watched a little bit of movies last night, about a movie and a half before they fell asleep. And again, grateful that I'm free to enjoy a day like today with my family. And you know what I mean? Hopefully everybody else felt the same with their outcome, sharing those memories, making memories with their family, but also hopefully that everybody was responsible and carried themselves in a professional manner, to the best of their ability, and they were able to, hopefully if they were drinking, they didn't drink and drive. They were able to take a taxi or Uber or even had to walk. Even walking is better than getting behind the wheel and perhaps, you know what I'm saying, jeopardizing somebody's health or their life, as well as your own or anybody that may be riding with you. Again, I'm going to emphasize this. A friend to the channel who has his own channel, he's already spoke about on his channel. Cousin of his paroled from prison, and they went out drinking to celebrate his release and welcome, basically like a welcome home. And he ended up was like, you know what? I only live 3-4 blocks. Fuck it, let's go. He ends up wrecking, and unfortunately, his cousin never seen past that day. He passed away in the accident. Um, what's up, Roscoe? I sent mine's brother to you, to Scotland. And so that happened there. So people have to always think, make sure that whatever your actions you're taking is worth it, in the long run. Not even so much the long run, but you don't end up regretting it because of something happening and hurting somebody or something like that. Because you'll always have that guilt on you. I should have did that. If I would have did that, he would have been here, or she would have been here, or those people would have been here. I wouldn't have had this accident or that accident. So take that and take that as in stride, people's. Not trying to tell nobody what to do, but obviously freedom's a lot better than being locked up. No doubt. I don't care how you look at it. There's nothing you can tell me that's gonna change my mind and believe that being locked up is worth more than being, feels better than being free out here. Okay, so I got another video for later about Nolan Ryan and Mike Schmidt, two profiles for baseball players. This profile is going to be about none other than the American Dream, the Common Man, Dusty Rhodes, my favorite wrestler of all time, my favorite singles wrestler. He was a chubby dude. Back in this thumbnail I put was when he came up to WWF, which back then it was 3 W's in the F, when it was Vince Senior's dad running. Vince dad was running it, Vince Senior, and it was 3 W's. So back then it was Worldwide Wrestling Federation. Then later, when Vince Jr. took over in 83, 84-ish, 85, whatever it was, he dropped off one of the W's and it became the World Wrestling Federation. And then later, because of the wildlife deal with the same initials for the acronym, and also the taxes, because he was paying sports taxes at the time, something with the taxes, and that's when he came out with calling it entertainment, and he ended up getting away with a lot of taxes and stuff like that. And then basically pretty much the kayfabe. If anybody don't know what kayfabe is, that means it's the tradition of wrestling, pro wrestling, where everything, the storyline inside the ring is carried out to real life. So in other words, Hulk Hogan is a babyface, good guy, right? Ric Flair is a heel, a bad guy. You will not catch them out on the streets, hanging out together, eating, dinner, breakfast, where people could see them. They had to keep the same storyline going, and have everybody think that they were actually mortal enemies and hated each other with the passion. So that's kayfabe, right? Um, Anything that's a secret that you don't just come out and tell is pretty much kayfabe. That's what that means. Okay, so um, that's what that is. So at this time when Dusty Rhodes goes up to, they would call WWF New York, right? Even though the offices is in Connecticut, they would call that New York. So New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Boston, Washington D.C. That was all considered the big time New York. A lot of guys later, especially in the I guess you could say mid '70s, late '70s, is for sure in the '80s when Hulk Hogan was big on his run. It was people wanted to get to New York because that was considered the big time, right? Um, Love Bret Hitman Hart. That's funny you say that. I'm looking right at Bret Hitman right now. There was a new documentary that came on. It's called 350 Days. It's a full movie about wrestling, and it was put out by Gravita's Free Sports. Gravita, and so it's got they talked to Bret the Hitman Hart a lot. They talked to Superstar Billy Graham a lot in the movie. They talked to Superfly Snuka, $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase. They talked to Greg the Hammer Valentine, Tito Santana, George Animal Steel, Lenny Poffo, which is the genius, or Leaping Lenny, the brother to the Macho Man. So these guys are spoke to during the film, and they're talking about basically back in those days, it was basically out of 365 days a year, you were literally doing something 350 days of the year. If not only because back then they used to wrestle every day, Monday through Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday they would wrestle twice. And a lot of the things were done for taping, TV taping, and they would be constantly on the road, going from territory to territory in cars usually. They would get in the air, airplanes. That was a little bit later, and then and talk about all the struggles, eating pork and beans out the can for your food, eating bologna sandwiches. They couldn't afford. Ted DiBiase said they couldn't even afford to eat a meal at McDonald's. So they would do is they would go buy a loaf of bread. If there was like 3 or 4 guys traveling in one vehicle, they'd go buy a loaf of bread and a pack of bologna, and they would just eat bologna sandwiches. They call it bologna blowout. He said, "Wow, the jumps he would do, super flat." Yeah, and so anyways, at that time, so this thumbnail is Superstar Billy Graham is the WWF champion. He beat Bruno Sammartino for the belt. Later, he gets beat by Bob Backlund, and then Bob Backlund gets beat by the Iron Sheik, and then here comes the big run by Hulk Hogan, and he blows it up, right? Okay, so everybody knows. Well, I don't know if everybody doesn't know or not. Superstar Billy Graham was an evangelist, and this guy whose name is Wayne Coleman, that's his real name. He took on this gimmick as Superstar Billy Graham. He dyed his hair back in the day. He had a big chopped sideburns, blonde, and his hair was blonde, and he wore a lot of tie dye, and he was the original. Okay, let me before I get to that. So he was a champion there for that territory for Vince Senior. You got Dusty Rhodes, who was already around for a few years already, was a superstar. The Common Man, right? He was the Common Man, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. His father was a plumber out of Texas, and he made big in Georgia Championship Wrestling and also Florida with Mike Graham down there. And then eventually he became the booker there. Then he became the booker for Jim Crockett Promotions, which was under the NWA banner, and then later bought out by WCW. And Dusty Rhodes, everybody knows he was a little bit chubby, blonde hair. Both of these guys had a hell of a promo. And for people that don't know what a promo is, it's when you get on that mic and you cut an interview. So really, well, I guess you could say interview. So basically they go up there, Jim Ross or JR, he's got the mic and he says, "Hey, Dusty Rhodes, we got Dusty Rhodes." So he turns the mic over to Dusty, and Dusty starts going off about, he wants the 4 Horsemen, he wants Tully Blanchard, he wants Arn Anderson, he wants Ric Flair, whatever. He gets into character and goes off. That's a promo. And these 2 guys, Dusty Rhodes and Superstar Billy Graham, were 2 of the best to ever do it. Hulk Hogan even admits later, because he came into the game of wrestling after these guys, but Hulk Hogan was from Florida. So he was around these guys a lot. He would go to the studios, he would go to the arenas, and he was trying to get in these guys' ears about how to break through the business. And he did come at Superstar Billy Graham one time at a bar, and he got at him about what he was doing training wise, and stuff like that. Because Hulk Hogan says that he was sleeping in his van to make it easier to get in, to try to wrestle. And he was a musician at the time. And Brutus the Barber Beefcake, he doubles down on it, and he co-signs that story because he used to sleep in the van with him. So, anyways, Hulk Hogan admits that he took a lot from both of these guys and mixed it in with his character, his gimmick, the way they talk, the verbiage, the style and the swag, also the look. He took the not so much the tie dye, but he took the bodybuilder look. He took definitely the verbiage, the brother. Oh, a lot saying the brother trying to rhyme and stuff. Dusty Rhodes was good at rhyming too, as well as Superstar Billy Graham. So it said that Dusty Rhodes gets sent up to WWF for Vince to wrestle Superstar Billy Graham, and I think it ends up being a draw. And whatever territory Dusty Rhodes was in at the time, he was a champion for that promotion. So I think he could have been the NWA World Champion, but I think he was either the Georgia Heavyweight Champ or the Florida Heavyweight Champ at that time. So usually what they would do in those cases, like when Ric Flair was the NWA Champion, there's like 26 promotions, territories that fall up under the NWA banner, right? So what happens is not only do they fall under the banner and they recognize whoever the NWA champ is at the time, they also have their own champions there. So you can have either the Florida heavyweight champion, the Texas heavyweight champion, the Georgia heavyweight champion, the TV champion, the United States champion. You know what I mean? So usually what they would do, like if Ric Flair went into, say, he went into a territory where, say, Coco Beware was a champ at that territory, they would either do a DQ or a count out or something, usually, or time limit. It would never usually be the NWA champion getting beat unless it was decided in a booking committee by the NWA, and the NWA signed off on it. So he gets sent up there to WWF to wrestle Superstar Billy Graham, and I believe it was a disqualification because at the time, Superstar Billy Graham, his manager was the Wizard, I think his name was at the time, and he came in there with that. He had that turban on his head, right? So, excuse me, Dusty Rhodes has trained a lot of people. Over the years, he's trained a lot of people. He's had a big influence on like Jim Crockett promotion, as far as like some of the names of the events to this day are still being used. That's a fact. So when his son, what's his name, Cody Rhodes, was in AEW, he was trying to use some of the names of like Halloween Havoc, stuff like that his father had invented. WWE stepped in and blocked it because they bought Jim Crockett Promotions, which was bought by WCW Turner, right? And then WWE bought them. So basically, they're saying that they own all rights to that. Okay, so let me give you a little background on Superstar Billy Graham, that's his ring name, right? His birth name is Eldridge Wayne Coleman. He's born on June 7th, 1943 in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona. Also, what I was going to say too, not only did Hulk Hogan take from Billy Graham his style, his promo style, his verbiage, but Jesse the Body Ventura and somewhat Ric Flair as somewhat, right? His ring names that he's known by was Billy Graham, Wayne Coleman, Superstar Billy Graham. He's billed at 6'4" and weighing 275 pounds. I don't believe he's 6'4". He could have been at one time because I heard him speaking on shoot interviews that he because of the injuries he's had over the years, he's lost about 3 inches in height, which Hulk Hogan, same thing. All these back injuries, knee surgeries, things like that. Hulk Hogan used to be 6'7". Now he's probably like 6'2". So I would imagine probably the same thing with Billy Graham, right? He made his debut in 1970 and he retired in 87. And he was trained by Stu Hart, which is Bret the Hitman's dad, up in Stampede Wrestling, which is Calgary, British Columbia. Other guys that I can think of offhand that trained that were trained by Stu Hart was Greg the Hammer Valentine and Dr. D. David Schultz. So he was born into a working class family in Phoenix, Arizona. Like I said, in 43 on June 7th, his father was from Mississippi and his mother claimed to be of Cherokee ancestry from Arkansas. Superstar Billy Graham was attracted to weightlifting in 5th grade. As a teenager, he was an avid reader of bodybuilding magazines, his idols being Steve Reeds and John Grimmick. As a teenager, he became a devout Christian and traveled to religious revivals where he incorporated faiths of strength into his sermons. Coleman was a shot put champ in high school, right? He also messed around in amateur and pro boxing. He participated in the 59 Golden Gloves. At 26, he tried out for the Canadian Football League, Calgary Stampeders, but was traded to the Montreal Alouettes. He played in only a couple of games. And then in between football engagements, he worked as a bouncer at various nightclubs, right? In different areas, but predominantly Phoenix, New York, and LA. After tearing his Achilles tendon, he decided to pursue professional wrestling. We know that it's been documented also by him. Well, it's been said by him, and also proof with documentations as far as pictures of him and Arnold Schwarzenegger, working out together. He was able to. He also worked out with Dave Draper and Franco Colombo in the Gold's Gym in Santa Monica, which is LA County. And at that time, he was able to bench 605 pounds. And then a friend of his had the world record by benching 616 pounds, Pat Casey. One of his photo shoots, superstar Billy Graham was with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and it was also featured in Joe Wilder's Muscle Fitness magazine. When he decided to become a wrestler, about 2 years later from that when he was bodybuilding big time, he had aspirations of marrying wrestling to bodybuilding, right? So he wanted to bring both together, right? He wanted to cross them, I guess, and do his thing, which it kind of somewhat did with little promo cuts, clips with Paul Orndorff. I seen Hulk, obviously Hulk. I seen also the Road Warriors, doing some things, So in 70, as he was a wrestler, he was also training continuously, and in 75 he prepared for the World Bodybuilding Guild's Pro Mr. America contest in New York City. His biceps were 22 inches and won first place of Best Developed Arms division. So it says he had 22-inch arms. From my recollection, it was Arnold Schwarzenegger had 22.5-inch arms. Because you remember Hulk Hogan used to say 24-inch pythons. No way. Hulk Hogan probably had at best 20s, 20 and a half, probably, maybe 21 back when he was 330 pounds. So what happened? So he won that best arms developed, and the best arms for 22 inches in the best developed arms division. At the peak of his wrestling career in 1977, he weighed about 275 pounds. In 78, he gained more weight, and in 80, he was at about 325. He took part in the World's Strongest Man competition in Great George, New Jersey, where he finished 7th in this contest, despite injuring himself in one of the events. On December 6th of that same year, 1970, I think it was 1980, he hosted the U.S. Invitational Pro Powerlifting championships in Arizona. All right, so he was encouraged he was encouraged in '69 by professional wrestler Bob Lewick to train with Stu Hart for the latter Stampede Professional Wrestling. That was also bought out by Vince McMahon. He trained under Stu Hart in Calgary he trained with Stu Hart before debuting on January 16, 1970 in a match with Dan Crofat. After wrestling briefly under his real name, superstar Billy Graham traveled back to the United States in May, wrestling for a few months with Dr. Jerry Graham, Brick Darrow, Rick Cahill, and Ron Pritchett in Arizona before he and Jerry Graham joined the NWA's LA promotion run by Mike LaBelle, right? As a tag team the following August, he changed his ring name to Billy Graham as a tribute to the famous evangelist, superstar Billy Graham. Later, while wrestling in championship wrestling from Florida, the name would serve both as a ring name and to make him the kayfabe youngest brother of Jerry and the other Graham brothers, Eddie and Luke. In late December of 1970, he went north to join Roy Shire's San Francisco promotion, which was also under NWA, and they had guys like Ray Stevens, Pat Patterson, Peter Maivia, Cyclone Negro. I think Pepper Gomez was there, I believe. He had a 2-year run, near 2-year run in California, including a stint wrestling in Hawaii in March and February of '72. But during his California period, that Graham developed a new aspect of his character. Before a match, he would stage an arm wrestling contest, encouraging public challengers to a title of Mr. Arm Wrestler of the World, right? Then he jumped promotions and went to AWA, which was ran by Vern Gagne in Minnesota area from '72 to '75. And that's when he started putting the name Superstar in his title, in his name. So he became now from Billy Graham to Superstar Billy Graham. He toured in the north central states and adjacent areas of Canada. Graham feuded with Gagne, the Crusher, the Bruiser, Wahoo McDaniel, Billy Robinson, Ken Patera, and Ivan Koloff. All big legendary names there, right? The latter becoming his tag team partner. By this time, Graham was integrated into his performances, not only arm wrestling contests, but also weightlifting challenges. And that's where the heat between him and Ken Patera, because if everybody don't know, Ken Patera was a gold medalist, or he was a medalist in the Olympics for powerlifting. And then he also had a lot of feuds with Wahoo McDaniel. For those that don't know, Wahoo McDaniel was let go by the New York Jets the year they drafted Joe Namath. And he had numerous bouts with Wahoo between '73 and '74. Among the matches they participated in were Indian strap matches. And during this feud with Wahoo, Superstar also teamed with Ivan Koloff to take on McDaniel and the Crusher in tag team matches. It was also during this time in AWA that he began wrestling Ivan Putski, the Polish powerhouse, right? And then later that year, Billy Graham took leave from AWA and he joined International Wrestling Alliance's Super Wide Series Tour of Japan, where he fought such local stars as Mighty Inui, Animal Yamaguchi, and Rusher Kimura. Following his return from Japan, Graham formed a tag team with Dusty Rhodes. I never knew that until I read that, but I made sure to write that so I didn't forget. He left the AWA and returned to the NWA in May of '75, signing up with Red Bastein's Dallas-based promotion for 5 months and taking the local Brass Knuckles title from Mad Dog Vachon. He also worked for Mid-Atlantic promotion in North Carolina, which was Jim Crockett promotion, standing in for Ric Flair, who had just been injured in that plane crash. Okay, then this is when he goes back to, but he starts wrestling for Vince Sr., WWF. He made his in-ring debut for WWF on October 25th, 1975, in a tag match at Boston Garden. where he teamed up with Spirios Arian, where they defeated WWF heavyweight champ Bruno Sammartino and Dominic DeNucci. And at this time, the Grand Wizard, yeah, I forgot. It was not just the Wizard, it was the Grand Wizard. That was his manager. And just after that match, that's when he became his manager. And then that's when he started feuding with the Polish muscle man powerhouse Ivan Putski. And then a brief contract with the NWA in Houston followed from June to August of '76. And then he went on a second tour of Japan, this time accompanied by Ivan Koloff, and he feuded with Antonio Inoki, who just passed away about a month within the last month. R.I.P. Antonio Inoki. And after returning to America, Graham and Koloff made an unsuccessful attempt to launch their own wrestling promotion in South Carolina, but it failed. And then in November '76, the invitation of Dusty Rhodes, Graham joins the NWA promotions in Florida, beating Rhodes for the Florida heavyweight title on November 26th at the West Palm Beach Auditorium. His work in this period included occasional visits to St. Louis, Missouri, where he took on NWA heavyweight champ Harley Race. I think Harley Race was the owner of that promotion in St. Louis. But as we all know, he was a legend, and I think he's a 6 or 7-time NWA champ, and that's who Ric Flair beat for his beginning his legendary run as the champ. And then he returned back to WWF in '77 to '78. I thought they changed the name back in well, actually, no, it still was. He returned to WWF in April of '77 after agreement with promoter Vince McMahon Sr. Graham defeated Bruno for the title in Baltimore on April 30th. And he held the title for 9.5 months. And that's when Dusty Rhodes comes up and wrestles him. That's what the thumbnail I put. And then during his reign, he wrestled across America and in Japan in '78, facing challengers such as former champion Bruno, Jack Briscoe, Dusty Rhodes, Pedro Morales, Don Morocco, Mil Mascaras Strong, Kobayashi, Carlos Rocha, and Ricky Choshu. So I don't know who those last three names are, but all the other names, Jack Briscoe that I mentioned, Dusty Rhodes, Pedro Morales, Don Morocco, Mil Mascaras, are all big time legends. Then he wrestled in Miami, Florida at the Orange Bowl football stadium. That's when he wrestled Harley Race, then NWA champion, and he was the WWF champion. So it was kind of like the Clash of the Champions to unify it, right? Which it ended in a 1 hour time limit draw, which that's usually what would always happen back then. It always would end in either a DQ, disqualification by interference, or time limit, right? Or a count out. It usually would never end in a pin, right? Just the way it was. And then he was defeated by Backlund, like I mentioned, and that was the last time he held that title. Then he returned back to the NWA. He left in '78 December, and he was accepted an offer to join Paul Bosch's promotion in Houston, Texas, lending himself out for another NWA event in California and Florida as well. And in April of '79, he embarked on his third Japan tour for IWA, where he wrestled the same man he worked with in '74. In October of '79, he became the CWA World Champion, which was Jerry Lawler's territory, and then he lost the belt to Jerry Lawler November, so exactly a month, in Lexington, Kentucky. His following NWA engagements in Kentucky and Tennessee, Georgia, and Texas became fewer and rarer until he stopped wrestling in April of 1980. Graham wrestled 2 matches, one in Canada and one in LA, in the whole 1981. He spent some time competing in Japan in '82, where he added some more martial arts techniques to his repertoire, because he ended up changing his gimmick to like a martial artist later on, and he wasn't as buff. He wasn't lifting weights like he must have stopped because he didn't look the same. He was a lot thinner. He had a big thick mustache. He shaved off he had no hair. He's bald. He shaved off the chops, which are the sideburns, and he had no chin hair, so he was clean shaved with a mustache, thick mustache, and now it was called WWF. Vince Jr. was running it, and he took off one of the F's, the W, excuse me. He debuted in the promotion with an entirely new look, like I just talked about. What I didn't mention, he had karate pants, right? And then he later stated that he wanted to retire the superstar character out of frustration with Vince Sr. for not letting him become a fan favorite. But after his return, he attacked Backlund, destroying his championship belt. He challenged Backlund for the WWF Championship, but was unable to win the title. He left the promotion again in 1983, and then he went back to the AWA, and also a return for the third time to the NWA. This was from 83 to 86. And he signed with the AWA again in 83, wrestling mainly in the Midwest. By the following year, he had regained his broader body weight, so he started hitting the gym again. And in April 84, he began his NWA run with Championship Wrestling from Florida, first as a member of the Kevin Sullivan's Army of Darkness, and later as the group's opponent as he was tired of Kevin Sullivan's abuse of his valet, the Lock, and stopped Sullivan from beating her at ringside, which was the valet. From November of 84, Graham joined Jim Crockett Promotions, which was formerly Mid-Atlantic, and in North Carolina, working for Paul Jones in his feud against Jimmy Valiant. It was during this stint in the summer of 85 that Graham bulked up further and returned to his tie-dye look, growing a full goatee and dyeing the mustache blonde. Then he comes back to WWF for his third return, and he one more time in June of 86, now as a fan favorite. After a few appearances, it was diagnosed in August that he required a hip replacement. The footage of Graham's hip replacement surgery was shown on WWF TV on September 27th as a means of promoting his comeback. He returned in mid-87 and worked a heavy schedule from July to October, feuding with Harley Race and Butch Reed. But the hip, as well as now his ankles, were giving him a lot of problems and deteriorating, probably having to do with a lot of the steroid use, right? And then in Syracuse in October 27th, one-man gang supposedly retired him from an active competition permanently with a running splash on the concrete floor after Graham's win over Butch Reed. And this incident aired on November 1487 episode of Superstars. Don Morocco came to Graham's aid, and Graham then started being, after that, Don the Rock Morocco's manager. And his last wrestling match was also against Butch Reed. He was 44 years old, and that took place on November 7th of 87 in St. Louis. Over the next year, in between bouts of surgery, Graham worked for the WWF as a commentator, so he retired then, and never got back in the ring. But superstar Billy Graham's been having a lot of problems lately with his health, and it Hannibal, he highlights a lot of it on this channel, and it's unfortunate, but a lot of it is from the steroid use. So Dusty Rhodes is born October 11, 1945, and he died June 11, 1915. His birth name was Virgil Riley Runnels Jr., but as we know, he was the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, a wrestler, right? He was born in Austin, Texas, died in Orlando, Florida, kidney failure. He's from West Texas State University, which has produced many pro wrestlers, many greats, many guys that have a lot of accomplishments, accolades, and hardware behind their names. I'm going to be doing a video on that later too, as well as all the wrestlers from Minnesota area and all the wrestlers that came out of West Texas State. As we already know, he has two kids that are involved in wrestling: Dustin Rhodes and Cody Rhodes, right? Names that he was known by in the ring was the Bounty Hunter, Dusty Rhodes, Dusty Runnels, the Midnight Rider, Mr. Ichiban, Uvalde Slim. It says that he was billed at 6'2", 275 pounds, and he was billed from Austin, Texas, and also Diablo Canyon, Colorado. He was trained by Joe Blanchard, which is Tully Blanchard's dad. He made his debut in 1967, and he retired in 2010. Um, Dusty Rhodes was a three-time NWA World Heavyweight Champ, and during his time in Jim Crockett Promotions, later WCW, he was United States Champ, multi-time World TV Champ, World Tag Team Champions, and also part of a World Six-Man Tag Team Championship team. He also won many regional championships and is one of 7 men inducted into each of the WWE, WCW, Pro Wrestling, and Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame. His sons, Dustin and Cody, both, like I already mentioned, they both were wrestlers. Let's see. In 67, after he saw an advertisement in the newspaper for Tony Santos' professional wrestling promotion, Big Time Wrestling, based in Boston, Rhodes drove to Boston and, despite not having any wrestling experience, bluffed his way into working for the company by using his real-life friendships with Bobby Duncombe and the Funk Brothers, also from West Texas State. Billed as Dusty Runnels, one of his first matches was for the BTW World Heavyweight Championship against champion Frank Scarpa. Having little money, Rhodes slept in his car and spent Thanksgiving with Rufus R. Jones in a Boston soup kitchen. So he moved to the Fritz von Erich Texas territory, WCCW, in '68. That time also called Big Time Wrestling. It was in Texas where Rhodes first adopted the ring name Dusty Rhodes. Upon meeting Rhodes, Gary Hart suggested that he change his ring name to Lonesome Rhodes, a character Andy Griffin portrayed in the film A Face in the Crowd. Dusty Rhodes replied simply, "Well, I don't plan on being lonesome. I think I'll stick with Dusty." Hart took an immediate liking to Rhodes and convinced Von Erich of the young wrestler's potential, right? In '68, Dusty left Texas and entered the Kansas City territory, tagging with fellow Texan Dick Murdoch to form the tag team, the Texas Outlaws. The team traveled both nationally and internationally, appearing in Big Time Wrestling in Texas, NWA Western State Sports in Texas, NWA Detroit, NWF Championship Wrestling from Florida, Championship Wrestling Australia, Tri-State Wrestling, AWA, and IWE International Wrestling Enterprise Japan. So Japan, NWA, excuse me, not Japan, NWA territories from '74 to '84. He did not have a typical wrestler's physique. He was chubby. One of the reasons why he's my favorite wrestler, because he didn't look like, he wasn't muscular. He had quick hands, and he was quick on his feet, and he was able to, with his size, to be, work. You know what I mean? But he had a hell of a personality, and he had he had a lot of charisma, and like I mentioned earlier in his promos, he could just, command a crowd, right? He could take over. So in '74, Rhodes' character became a hero after tag team partner Pac Song and manager Gary Hart turned on him during a match in Florida against Eddie and Mike Graham. This led him to break out a solo wrestling career, primarily in Florida, referring to himself as the American Dream, a working class hero, and aligning himself with Eddie Graham. In '77, Rhodes wrestled for Vince Sr., WWF, on and off for lengthy periods of time until '83. And also, a lot of these guys were shipped around doing favors for other promoters to bring, fresh faces to different territories, you know. And during that time, Rhodes was main event twice in Madison Square Garden, both times challenging for the title. Once against superstar Billy Graham. He won the first match via countout, so the belt never changed hands. And then and he lost the second match, Texas Death Match, on October 24th. Graham won after a mid-ring collision, falling on Dusty Rhodes for the 3 count. Jim Crockett Promotions, he was a booker for, which was Mid-Atlantic, right? So the booker basically is the one who brings in the talent. He books the matches for who's going to wrestle who's going to be the opener, the second match, third match, mid card guys, the main event. Also, he tells them what's going to happen, how the ending of the match. So it's a powerful position within. You know what I mean? Um, and this was for Mid Atlantic, which was Jim Crockett Promotions out of North Carolina. Um, but later it was bought out by Ted Turner and became WCW full time, um, which was also Georgia Championship Wrestling. So Dusty Rhodes teamed up with Magnum TA as America's team. Magnum TA had a good sized run originally with um, Bill Watts in Mid South, which a little later became UWF. Um, and Magnum TA came on over to Jim Crockett, and they opposed the Four Horsemen and the Russian team. They were one of the more dominant tag teams in the promotion until '86 because unfortunately Magnum TA had a career-ending car accident, and then subsequently he teamed up with Nikita Koloff as superpowers because Nikita Koloff ended up having a falling out with his uncle Ivan, and this is all Dusty Rhodes. Also, what I didn't mention is the booker are the ones that put out the storylines, the heat. They're the ones that create the heat. You know what I mean, for the wrestlers. Um, Dusty was a two-time six-man tag team champ with the Road Warriors, and then Dusty Rhodes had feuds with Abdullah the Butcher, Pac Song, Terry Funk, Kevin Sullivan, Blackjack Mulligan, Nikita Koloff, Harley Race, Billy Graham, the Crippler Ray Stevens, and most notably was, like I mentioned, again, I'm going to mention the Four Horsemen, specifically Ric Flair and Tully Blanchard. Rhodes, Flair, and Race fought each other many times over the NWA Championship belt. Rhodes won the NWA title 3 times, like I mentioned earlier, twice by defeating Race and once by defeating Flair. October of '85, during his feud with Flair, Rhodes gave an interview that became known as the Hard Times promo, arguably his most popular promo. He says, first of all, I would like to thank the many, many fans throughout this country that wrote cards and letters to Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, while I was down. Secondly, I want to thank Jim Crockett Promotions for waiting and taking the time, because I know how important it was, Starrcade '85. I believe Dusty Rhodes was also the inventor coming up with the name Starrcade as well. It is to the wrestling fans, it is to Jim Crockett Promotion and Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream. With that weight, I got what I wanted. Ric Flair, the world champion. I don't have to say a lot more about the way I feel about Ric Flair. No respect, no honor. There is no honor amongst thieves in the first place. He put hard times on Dusty Rhodes and his family. You don't know what hard times are, Daddy. Hard times are when the textile workers around this country are out of work. They got 4 or 5 kids and can't pay their wages, can't buy their food. Hard times are when the auto workers are out of work and they'll tell them to go home. Hard times are when a man has worked at a job for 30 years, 30 years, 30 years, and they give him a watch, kick him in the butt and say, hey, computer took your place, Daddy. That's hard times. That's hard times. And Ric Flair, you put hard times on this country by taking Dusty Rhodes out. That's hard times. And we all had hard times together. And I admit, I don't look like the athlete of the day supposed to look. My belly's just as a little big. My hiney's a little big. But, brother, I am bad, and they know I'm bad. He said, they were 2 bad people. One was named John Wayne. He's dead, brother. The other is right here. Nature Boy Ric Flair, the World Heavyweight title belongs to these people. I'm going to reach out right now. I want you at home to know my hand is touching your hand for the gathering of the biggest body of people in this country. In this universe, all the world now reaching out because the love that was given me, this time I will repay you now because I will be the next World Heavyweight Champion of this Hard Time Blues, Dusty Rhodes Tour 1985. And Ric Flair, Nature Boy, let me leave you with this. One way to hurt Ric Flair is to take what he cherishes more than anything in the world, and that's the world's heavyweight title. I'm going to take it. I've been there twice. This time when I take it, Daddy, I'm going to take it from you. Let's gather for it.
Don't let me down now, because I came back for you. For that man upstairs that died 10, 12 years ago and never got the opportunity to see a real world champion, and I'm proud of you. Thank God I have you, and I love you. Yeah. So that was his promo. That was a famous promo. You've heard people from TV shows such as like Good Morning America. I heard people restate that a few times. Good morning, Jamie and Bella and friends. The promo apparently resonated with wrestling fans so much that people came to arenas in tears to thank him for honoring their plight. And like I said, that's true. Um, during his stint as Booker at Jim Crockett Promotions, during his time as Booker, Jim Crockett Promotions were engulfed in aggressive competition with the WWF. When the WWF introduced Mike Jones as Ted DiBiase's bodyguard, Bobby Heenan suggested naming the character Virgil as an inside joke on Dusty's real name. Also, in the late 80s, Rhodes became synonymous with what would become known as the Dusty finish, a tricking ending in which a wrestler would win a match while the referee was knocked out. The decision would be overturned. Right. So Dusty Rhodes, he ended up going to WWF, working for Vince Jr. And they put him in polka dots. Everybody knows it was kind of a poke fun at Dusty, but Dusty, being the entertainer he is, with all the charisma that he has, he commanded, the crowd. He was able to get people going with it, and he was able to do a dance and sing. And he brought the lady, I forgot the lady's name, that ended up being his manager. He picked her out of the crowd. Um, um, I think Dusty Rhodes at one time started trying to start a new promotion, which was called, I think it was called Pro Wrestling Federation, I think. Um, which a lot of big name guys that had a lot of, a lot of that carried a lot of weight behind their names, such as Terry Funk, Dick Slater, Bam Bam Bigelow, Al Perez, the Nasty Boys, Scott Hall, his son, Dallas Page, Tugboat was named the Big Man Steel there. Um, he made his debut for that company in '89 at an event in Florida when he teamed with Steve Keirn to defeat the duo of the Big Man Steel and Dick Slater. Um, but I don't think that promotion lasted long. But Dusty Rhodes, like I said, man, he a lot of people hate on Dusty because they say that he put himself around whoever was hot at the time, who was getting a lot of heat, such as the Road Warriors, Magnum TA, Nikita Koloff. You hear a lot of guys complain about him. Same way they complain about Ric Flair and Dusty and Hulk Hogan. Um, you know, Nobody can deny that Dusty commanded. Uh, he not commanded, but he dictated the way matches were going. He was the booker, obviously, but I'm talking about his in ring charisma, his in ring talent. He was able to sell for guys. You know, what that means is when it looks like you're getting beat up, that you act like you're getting beat up, even though you're not really getting beat up. You know what I mean? Um, so Dusty Rhodes, he had all that. You know, he just didn't have the look of Hulk Hogan, but he was quick. Like I said, he was quick on his hands. He was quick on his feet. He can jump over the rope. He can frog leap. He can uh, what's that one when you kick a person when you kick him? I can't think of it right now, but he could do that too. You know what I mean? Dusty Rhodes was a legend, man. He was my favorite wrestler, singles wrestler in Jim Crockett Promotions. Um, my my favorite in WWF during my childhood from like 84, 85 ish was Ricky Steamboat and also Jimmy Snuka. And my tag team was the British Bulldogs, and my that was WWF. And Jim Crockett, NWA, my favorite tag team was the Road Warriors. And then AWA, I liked a few different people. I like Larry Sabisco. You know what I mean? Um, they had a lot of different tag teams over there. But that's just a little bit about these two wrestlers who are definitely legends in the game. Unfortunately, Dusty passed away about 7 years ago. Um, and he's responsible, like I said, for coming up with the idea of Halloween Havoc, of the bunkhouse match. I think the bunkhouse match, the Starcade, Great American Bash. He was the inventor, the idea for these. You know what I mean? He was a good booker in Florida with Mike Graham and his dad, and then also in Texas over there at WCCW. Wasn't a booker there. Then he became a booker also in Jim Crockett Promotions, North Carolina. You know what I mean? There were two different style wrestlers. Um, I wouldn't say Dusty was a technical wrestler like Bret the Hitman, but he could get in there and do his thing. He could be a powerhouse guy if he had to, where they were, or he could be a brawler, or he could wrestle. But one thing for sure, both these guys had in common the gift of gab on the mic with the promos. They had the swag, all that worked for him. And like I said, Hulk Hogan admitted to this in some of his shoot interviews that he took a lot of both guys and put it in his own persona, his own gimmick, his own character of Hulk Hogan. You know what I mean? And it is what it is. These guys both are in the record books as tremendous wrestlers and entertainers, obviously. And you know what I mean? I just thought I should bring something to light on these guys as part of my part of my profiles that I'm doing on sports players from the 80s, from pro wrestling, boxing, football, basketball, and baseball. For the morning, I got something scheduled for Nolan Ryan and Mike Schmidt. And hopefully tomorrow I'll be doing something either on prison or mob, something on the mob. But I got to reach out and see if I can get somebody to come on with me, because sometimes you can only say so much stuff without, it's better to have somebody because you can bounce off each other. A lot of times your perspective might not be the same as my perspective. You know what I mean? So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and shut this down and my alarm today. I'm going in late. My alarm's set for 6, so I'm still unwinding from Halloween last night. So with that being said, I appreciate Bella and friends stopping in, Jamie Rupert, Roscoe, and be sure to hit that like button. And also, me and my father love Rey Mysterio. That's what's up. Also, everybody that comes and watches this after it's uploaded by YouTube or later in the day or even later in the future, I'm telling you guys here and now, I appreciate each and every one of you guys that took the time to watch this video. And with that being said, Big Lou, tapping on out. I wish everybody a blessed, positive, and productive Tuesday at work, on the actual job site, or if you work at home, or you school your kids, or anything, every aspect of your life. I wish everybody a blessed, positive, and productive one. And remember, people, always be aware of your surroundings, and move forward in awareness, move forward in righteousness, and you got to be always aware of what other people are doing. You know what I mean? And with that said, Big Lou tapping on out. Thanks, everybody.